Hello and welcome. You're watching India Global. I'm Gaurie Dwivedi. We start with a big story that we are focused on. In fact, there are now reports that indicate that Russia may have agreed to ensure that President Trump's administration is able to broker talks with Iran on issues that could include the nuclear program as well. Which brings me to ask viewers that is this what the real game plan is? That Russia-Ukraine solution is important for Trump administration because of its larger Iran focus. And that's where President Putin could be extremely crucial. In fact, some reports indicate that President Putin may have agreed to be part of some sort of a solution between the US and Iran. What shape it will take remains to be seen. But the fact that such a mediation can take place is really the big story that we are focused on today on India Global, because it has many legs to it, it has many angles to it, and it impacts everybody, including viewers who are watching this broadcast and in India as well. For starters, it would mean that the entire program with regard to how Iran needs to be approached will be completely changed. What will be the role that President Putin will play in this? How soon will that happen? More importantly, what will be the role that some of the other Arab and the GCC countries like Saudi Arabia would play is going to be very important, because reports also indicate that this conversation happened in the early February phone call between President Trump and President Putin, following which there were some discussions between the Trump administration officials and those on the Russian administration officials, and then the matter was taken up with Saudi Arabian counterparts as well. So what does this mean is going to be my big focus. But how soon could this happen, and is this really the leverage that Russia has and President Putin has, is really the key question. Let's get in Tatiana, senior journalist, joining me live from Moscow to decode some of this. Tatiana, is this what, as I said, the real leverage could be for President Putin, and the reason why several other aspects of the geopolitical tensions may resolve sooner than we know?
Look, Gaurie, I know that we're talking right now first and foremost about the reports that came out in Western media today, but the President Putin spokesman, Dmitry Peskov, has already confirmed that, he's claimed that Kremlin does think that the US and Iran have to kind of resolve all of their problems via negotiations, and that Moscow is prepared to do whatever is in its powers to facilitate that. However, as to leverage, I don't believe that this would be the primary focus of that. You know, we've seen it throughout these past years and throughout the rule of the previous administration that basically not having any sort of negotiation, not having any sort of diplomatic contact does not work in the bigger picture and in the longer term. So I do believe that should the US and Iran actually come to any sort of a table and start any sort of dialogue on the nuclear program, that would be a great development for the world.
And as I said, probably the real leverage that Russia really has on this. In fact, Tatiana, stay with me, because, you know, there are several important aspects to what's been unfolding in the Trump administration right now. The fact that Iranian channels could be opened through Russia is one aspect to it. There's another aspect, which is that Trump has suspended military aid to Ukraine, sharply escalating pressure on Kyiv to agree to peace negotiations with Russia. And this move, of course, comes just days after that very stunning public clash between Zelensky and Donald Trump. Now, which way this will go is too early to tell, but the pause is likely to have major impact. Weapons in transit will also, in fact, now be put on hold. It's left many wondering what this could mean for the embattled Ukrainian forces. US is also drawing up a plan to potentially give Russia sanctions relief. And what that means, of course, is that giving a fresh lease of life to the Russian economy, which has been battered by the sanctions, not as significantly as many would have hoped in 2022, but definitely the impact has been there. Now, on two sides. One, that the aid would be stopped, and second, the Russian economy would be given a lifeline. What does that mean? is the big question that I'm putting forth. Does this now mean that we are one step away from a proper normalization between the two sides? Is this also going to be a big boost for the Indian energy industry? Remember, we've been able to circumvent some of these sanctions because America allowed us to do, because of the US-India relationship, but it has had an impact on us. What will be the positive take of these sanctions being lifted on the Indian industry is something we're going to focus on. And also the fact that, well, for better or for worse, are we then seeing a complete change in the US foreign policy with both these measures being brought about? One, the Ukraine aid stopping, and second, the Russian sanctions being lifted. Tatiana, I know you want to come in there, but let me just get in some of the other guests as well, and I'm going to give you a chance as well. Ambassador Virendra Gupta and also David K. Johnston. Ambassador Gupta, let me start with you because, both of these aspects and these developments have a huge impact on how Indian industry will be impacted, the energy basket will be impacted. How do you view these developments coming in?
Well, Gaurie, I think what is very clear is that if we are going to see normalization of relationship between US and Russia, what Trump has done in very simple terms, rejected the construct created by former administration, Biden, along with the other Western countries, of putting Russia as the centerpiece of the villain. So you develop the entire matrix by defining Russia as the biggest enemy. Trump has all along maintained, in fact, even during his first presidency, that he outlined the two biggest threats that the world faced, according to him, were China and
Iran.
And the terrorism, and the international terror. So I think his energies are going to be focused. He sees a lot of positive synergies emerging by working together with Russia. Russia has sizable influence all across the world. And I think what we see possibly happening in Iran is a spin-off benefit by way of improved relationship with, I think, and from our standpoint, Gaurie, we have good relations with both US and Russia. So I think we couldn't be happier seeing this development of closer relationship between US and Russia.
Indeed. And, just before I started this broadcast, there was a news piece that NDTV broke, which is about the fact that Foreign Secretary will be in Russia later this week for talks on trade and several other aspects of the India-Russia relationship. So it has to be seen in the context of the broader realignment that the world may be going through. And David K. Johnston, senior journalist and author, let me ask you this, that is this now larger geopolitical realignment that we are seeing in the world right now? Trump wants to focus on China, Trump wants to focus on Iran, and he wants to normalize relationship with Russia.
What you're seeing. And under Donald Trump, we have abandoned as a country the idea that we stand for liberty, we stand for people who've been invaded by a foreign power in violation of its own written agreements in the case of Ukraine. And we stand with dictators. Because Donald is now America's de facto dictator, he's simply consolidating power. Without a doubt, as your previous guest said, there's a bigger picture here. The U.S. relationship with Iran, for example, is the result of a whole series of just terrible decisions by the U.S., starting with overthrowing the Iranian government in 1954. But at the moment, what you're seeing is America abandoning its traditional role as a champion of liberty and democracy in favor of aligning itself with a murderous dictator who invaded a country, Ukraine.
Okay, so yes, so Tatiana, the other aspect, I know as the Russian journalist on the panel, you have every reason to be smiling, in which you are, because some of these news reports do favor your president, it favors your country.
That's not why I'm smiling, Gaurie. That is not why I'm smiling. I always smile when an American tries to tell me, a Russian, about invading other countries, which I do believe neither an American nor British person and nor actually a French person has any right to talk about at all, because again, we're now seeing something that could be incredibly impactful for the Middle East and for Europe. And And you're talking about, you're sticking to the same rhetoric of demonization. I think the biggest outcome of this and the biggest shift that we're facing, Gaurie, back to the question that you asked about 3 minutes ago, the biggest impact on the global stage is that Donald Trump is actually making an incredible shift from the policy of demonization to an actual market economy.
Okay.
And that could have incredible implications for every country on the planet, including India, but not limited to, obviously, Russia and Iran, should that actually happen.
Yeah, not just limited to Russia and Iran, of course. If at all normalization of ties does take place, sanctions do get lifted, it would also mean that some of the European allies of America will start getting access to cheaper Russian gas, something that hasn't happened for 3 years. It has battered their economies. There's a whole different discussion around that, which I don't want to get into.
India has made a lot of money off of it, so, might not benefit India. But in the meantime, Europe is a whole different story, though.
Yeah, that's what I said. It's a completely different discussion, and I don't want to get into that. But Ambassador Gupta, very quickly, I want to ask you this, that even before, day before demitting office, President Biden, in fact, came out with those farewell Russian sanctions, so to say. It impacted oil cargoes, it impacted a whole host of other areas in terms of how we get access to Russian crude. Do you think specifically the lifting of sanctions could actually have a huge impact on the Indian economy, apart from several other geopolitical realignment?
It will. In fact, to say the least, what Biden did was very unethical. He had no business to be taking those far-reaching decisions in the dying hours of his presidency. He should have left it to the new president, who was already elected. Surely, look, if you're talking about normalization of relationship, and one can get into this Ukraine business, Trump has already, put the blame squarely on Zelensky as having been responsible for starting the war. He's been led up the garden path by Western countries. And I think that is, so it is not something, the Western view was created and propagated through the use of powerful media tools that Putin alone was the aggressor. Circumstances were created under which Putin had probably no other option left.
Sir, my director says I have to take a break. So 30 seconds I ask you this, Ambassador Gupta, which is that what a unique position will normalization of ties between US and Russia put India in?
Well, India, as I said earlier, has good relations with Russia and America. Mind you, America is well cognizant of India's good relations. India has been buying new weapons and oil, and America has gone along with it. So I think we will be saved with that dilemma and that anguish of trying to balance one another.
Absolutely. I'm afraid I do have to take that commercial break because on the other side, I'm going to come back and talk more about trade diplomacy. That seems to be the big buzzword in 2025. Stay with us. This is India Global. We now turn our attention to what is really becoming the big buzzword in 2025. That's trade diplomacy. It started with President Trump announcing a series of trade tariffs, and now there is retaliatory tariffs that have been announced by others. In the midst of this, you have countries like India, which are trying to protect their interests by ensuring that they can try and create some sort of trade negotiations. So viewers, what has happened is that President Trump imposed tariffs on Canada, Mexico and China. He doubled down on them by saying that the time period for any discussions is over. They kick in. Well, the countries are also not taking any of this lying down. Remember, Canada's Liberal Party has actually seen a bump up in its approval ratings because it is seen to be responding proactively to Trump's tariffs. So they've also announced a series of tariffs. China has threatened to announce more tariffs. whereas Mexico has held it so far. Mexican president hasn't announced any tariffs, but that's just one aspect of this story. The larger point is, where does this leave free trade? Where does this leave countries like India, which are trying to find the right way in which they can identify their best interests and create some trade negotiated settlements? So before we go any further, just how far this trade war has already gone, you're going to get a sense of it by listening into what Donald Trump and the Chinese Ministry of spokesperson has to say. Listen in.
But very importantly, tomorrow tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. So they're going to have a tariff. So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
On the tariffs, is there any room left for Canada and Mexico to make a deal before midnight? And should we expect those Chinese tariffs, the extra 10%, to take
No
effect?
room left for Mexico or for Canada. No, the tariffs, they're all set. They go into effect tomorrow.
美方如果真想解决芬太尼问题，就应该在平等、尊重、互惠的基础上，同中方磋商，解决各自关切。美方如果别有所图，执意打关税战、贸易战或者别的什么战，中方将奉陪到底。我们奉劝美方收起霸凌的嘴脸，趁早回到对话合作的正确轨道上来。
All right, Terry Miluski, who's joining me live from Canada. Ambassador Gupta, was, of course, with the IDSA, and David K. Johnston, senior journalist and author. Terry, let me start with you. Canada, Mexico and China are the top 3 trade partners of the US. In fact, with Canada and Mexico, Trump did stitch together a free trade agreement last time around. But how do you see this rhetoric that's going on this time around, and how that trade war is only escalating with Canada responding?
Well, I think Canada has learned from what happened last time that Mr. Trump was president. At that time, you will recall that Canada imposed retaliatory tariffs, which were very carefully targeted. Targeted, that is, on areas of the United States, businesses in the United States, which were A, vulnerable, B, in a position to put pressure on President Trump. So, for example, Mitch McConnell was the Republican leader in the Senate, and guess what? He's from Kentucky, and Kentucky bourbon, yes, that was on the Canadian tariff list. That's just an example. So I think that this time, Canada is making a serious effort to be just as strategic, even more strategic, carefully applying the pressure where they hope that it will hurt the most in order to impose a cost upon the American administration. Canada also is well aware that this time around, the whole world is ready for it. It's been advertised. We find ourselves now in the same camp as rather a powerful group of countries, including China, of course, that are resentful and angry about the imposition of these tariffs by the United States and determined to make it every bit as costly as they can for the Americans. Now, already we have seen that a lot of Americans have lost money. How so? Because they only just came on today. Well, yes. That's because the stock market slid, what, 2% yesterday? And it's probably going to go down more. This is going to hurt everyone. Indeed. And it remains to be seen. The only question, the open question, is that there will be pain aplenty, not just in the targeted countries, but in the US. How long it will take to have some effect is that question we can't answer yet. We're going to have to see how resilient Trump is in insisting that his brand of know-nothing 19th century economics will survive and prove itself as successful. I doubt that very much.
Absolutely. Ambassador Gupta, in the midst of all this, this matters to us because how does this impact our trade interests? We're trying to stitch FTAs, whether with the EU, with the UK. There's the Belgian delegation here. We're also, there is a trade delegation that is in the US to try and see what we can do to insulate our interests. How do you see our next steps in the midst of a very charged, protectionist global trade environment?
Well, firstly, we've shown a lot of understanding to the position that Trump has taken. He's, after all, reanalyzing the trade relations from the point of view of interest to America. And I think nobody can fault anybody for that. You're supposed to protect your national interest. And now, having said that, India is a very small exporter. Our exports are about $50 billion. And when you compare it with all the three countries that were listed, Mexico, China, and Canada, they all export in upwards of $400 billion. So our exports are really just about 10-12% of what these countries are exporting. So we are a very small player in this. Plus, we have been shown a very conciliatory approach, and we are trying to negotiate a trade deal. Our Commerce Minister is already in the US.
Yes.
We are looking at expanding the trade with America, making it to about $500 billion. We've also shown willingness when Prime Minister Modi was there that we will buy energy sources from US. And there are indications, I'm sure, which has not been spelled out, but India is going to buy or increase its purchase of military hardware from America. So I think all said and done, plus, mind you, America and Trump do recognize India as a very important strategic ally. Indeed. So I think India would be spared the rod, it seems to me.
Mr. Johnston, then, which brings me to ask you this question. Some of the other panelists mentioned that this is going to have an impact on the American consumer, on the American economy. How do you think President Trump is going to respond to that or cushion his electorate?
Well, he's not. Donald Trump actually follows 17th century economics. He's a mercantilist, the same economics that led the British to put India under London's boot for 3 centuries. And he believes that if you have a dollar, that means he doesn't have that dollar, and that the only way to get it is to take it from you. And tariffs are an effective strategy for a developing country. But those tariffs are going to be paid by American consumers who are going to see their prices rise, and it's going to make Americans worse off. Donald has this bizarre notion that China and Canada and Mexico are going to pay these tariffs, and they are not. And also, remember that Donald denounced our trade agreements, America's trade agreements with Canada and Mexico. He said, who would do this? Well, he did. This is his own agreement. And it goes to the heart of the fact that Donald is appallingly ignorant. He really doesn't know anything.
Okay. Sir, at the cost of repeating, experts can get away by expletives to heads of state. Journalists have to refrain. So, I'm not going to allow, those comments simply because, they're extreme in nature. But the fact is, this trade war has only started. And I feel it is going to impact all countries, those who may or may not be part of it. On that note, we slip into a very short break. We come back with lots more on the other side of India Global. Stay with us. This is India Global. We now turn our attention to the Champions Trophy, where the first semi-final is underway. It's India versus Australia there, where India has been able to restrict Australia to just 264 runs. Men in blue are now set to chase 265 runs in 50 overs. The update is that Steve Smith has scored 73 runs, while Alex Carey scored another half century. And Indian spinners took 5 wickets. All eyes now on India's top order. Let's get a quick update on this from Shreya Ghosh, who's joining me live from the newsroom to give us, she's standing by there to give us a sense of, well, what's it looking like right now? It doesn't look like a really tall order at this stage. Everyone hoping for the men in blue to reach the final.
Absolutely, the mother of all clashes. India versus Australia is surpassing the intensity of India versus Pakistan. It's quite breezy here in the national capital, but I'm currently joined by someone who is wearing blue to support India. He also has a cricket bat in his hand. So we can see that India's disciplined bowling has restricted Australia to 264 runs.
Yes.
Do you think India will turn the tide and erupt victorious, or do you think Australia will retain its aura of invincibility?
My viewpoint is that India is going to score very well today, and they are definitely going to win this particular match. And as far as the Australian aura is concerned, yes, Australia has had an aura earlier, but I don't think that is the status as of today. Now, India does have an edge over, yes, Australia.
Why do you think India has that slight edge over Australia this time? Is it because of our brilliant batsmen?
Yes, indeed, due to our brilliant batsmen, and also our spinners have done a fantastic job in this tournament. And as you look into the last match against spinners performed, this match also they have done well. So India is poised to win.
Right. We have seen how Varun Chakravarti has bowled Travis Head, who is almost considered a nightmare for
Absolutely,
Team India.
Shreya.
And
I
we
couldn't
also
agree
saw-
more. And let me quickly then also rope in Rika here from the studio to really give me a sense of, Rika, you've been tracking the men in blue. In fact, I also see you wearing blue in solidarity. Talk to me about what's it looking like for Indian team now.
Well, you see, India can very well cross over the finish line, but it is going to be a tricky chase because Australia is the team that has scored the highest on this ground in this edition of the tournament. 264 is the highest score so far in this tournament. 265 is going to be India's target. So the chase, though it doesn't look daunting at this point, but it might turn out to be tricky. India has to control the middle overs very well. It is not going to be about a brisk start and a rapid finish, but it is going to be about controlled aggression against the Australians. A brisk innings might lead to a rapid fall in wickets and a rapid slide. That is something Indians would love to arrest. Of course, Rohit Sharma and Shubman Gill has begun the chase and they are in the middle right now. Indian spinners once again bowled brilliantly to pick up 5 wickets. Mohammad Shami was I would say the leader of the pack today. He came to the party with 3 wickets for the first time. He's been so good in the tournament. He's come back to the team after a long injury layoff and he is delivering the goods for Team India. So bowlers have done their job and have given India a good total to chase down on this track at the Dubai International Stadium and get into the finals.
Absolutely. And Rika, Virat Kohli would like to get another century under his belt. Nothing like a semi-final against Australia.
Well, you see, Virat is a man for big occasion. He loves the big stage. He loves the oppositions that challenge him the most. And yes, Australia is one of those oppositions that have challenged him time and again. And Virat Kohli has come up trumps against them. So yes, he would love to score another century. But you see, he himself says a century is as good as getting the team over the finish line. That is something he would be looking at. He is known as the chase master, and India has a brilliant opportunity to chase down a target today.
Absolutely, indeed. And a quick word from Shreya. She's outside in the capital meeting all of Kohli fans. I'm sure they must be rooting for a century from the Delhi boy.
Absolutely. I'll divert the question to the fans here. Do you think Team India will be able to score a century this time?
Yeah, I hope so because they are doing good and we are very hopeful for Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli also. I am hoping that Rohit Sharma score good runs today. He's in good form and we all should appreciate his captaincy because he has bought 4 spinners. That's quite interesting because of Gautam Gambhir also, the selector, and also the the team man he is, the type of person he is. So we should appreciate Gautam Gambhir also. The way he has.
It's going to be time for redemption.
Yeah, exactly. Because they have got Travis Head also earlier and Steven Smith, and I'm happy for that.
Yes.
But I am hoping to score that Rohit Sharma and Virat Kohli scored good runs today.
Right. Thank you so much for speaking to NDTV. That's the common sentiment here in the national capital. Back to you.
All right, Rika and Shreya, thanks much for giving me and giving our viewers that update. And we're going to keep coming back to you as the Indian team sets its chase. Shifting focus now, well, to China, where its annual major political event, which is the Chinese National People's Congress meeting, began today in Beijing. Almost 2,900 delegates came together to pretty much just rubber stamp decisions that have been taken by the all-powerful Chinese Communist Party. They're also the highest decision-making body, takes all decisions. And rest of this is just an exercise in trying to create some sort of an aura of ensuring that the decision-making is more democratic. It isn't. As I said, this is a rubber stamp exercise. The idea really is to signal the priorities of the government for the coming year, to disseminate instructions to party members and officials across the country. Amidst the growing trade and AI war between Washington and Beijing, harnessing the potential of AI and shoring up the economy are also expected to be major issues that the meeting is set to address. Chinese Premier is expected to announce an economic target growth target of around 5%. That's in line with the last couple of years. Okay, staying with China, there's an important development that's come in along the line of actual control in Ladakh. There's an exclusive story that my colleague Vishnu Som is in fact going to bring, which is about these exclusive satellite imagery that seem to suggest that Chinese settlements equipped with roads, power lines and transformers seem to have come. And these structures signal Beijing's expanding presence, even though they lie on the Chinese side of the LAC. What this means, Vishnu Som decodes for you.
This new Chinese settlement with at least 91 independent weatherproof structures, all of which you can see over here, is near completion on the south bank of the Pangong Lake in Ladakh. So before we bring you details, where exactly does this lie? Well, the new settlement lies next to the Spangor Lake on China's side of the line of actual control. So this is the Spangor Lake right in the bottom of the screen over here. It lies to the south of the Pangong Lake, right? And this is the site of the Chinese settlement on the banks of the Spangor Lake. It's about 7 kilometers from the line of actual control. That is the line that you see over here, 7 kilometers from the line of actual control in Ladakh. But remember, this is territory which is held by the Chinese. It's on the Chinese side of the line of actual control. They've held that since 1962. Now, here's the high-resolution satellite imagery acquired by NDTV, which shows the settlement has completed roads, electricity transformers, lampposts, and a community center with likely administrative offices. It's got a lot more as well. But let's zoom into this image a little while. Let's just scroll through this image so that you get an idea of the extent of the construction. So let's just pan through this image to go through this entire township which has been constructed over here. And once we do that, I can give you a few other details. For example, we have located over here a transformer, a transmission cable attached to a transformer. We've zoomed in on that image over here. Lower down, there are pictures of, there is a photograph of a car in this image as well. There are several cars. There are more than a dozen cars in this particular site. That's a close-up of that. If we again pan out and then move to the left of this image, right, then what we can see over here are trucks. This is an image of trucks over here. These trucks are located right next to this. And this is a cement plant. The fact that this cement plant is still there indicates that the construction may not quite be over. This is believed to be the town center with offices which are under construction and 90-odd homes. They've even got lampposts which we've been able to identify. And this is that road to that Spangor Lake that we were talking about. So once again, let's just scroll through to give our viewers an idea of the expanse of this entire township, which the Chinese have constructed on the banks of Spangor Lake, albeit on their side of the line of actual control. Now, in a statement to NDTV, the Indian Army has said, and I quote, "The construction activities at the northeast bank of Spangor Lake as highlighted through this imagery pertains to a likely Chinese border settlement. The location is well away from the line of actual control. The construction activity does not violate any existing agreements and doesn't hinder the border management process. Remember, that's a process which is now ongoing.
All right, fresh updates coming in as far as Neelam Shinde is concerned, a case that NDTV has been at the forefront of following up on. The details that are coming in right now is that Neelam Shinde's family did, remember, get a visa, and they are in the US right now. The process is on. Her medical treatment has been underway. And though, of course, she continues to remain in critical condition, her father visited her at the hospital in California where she is being treated. She is still in coma, but her situation seems to be improving. Her surgery is also underway. Remember, till now, that entire process had been halted because blood relatives had not reached and were not able to give the consent for the process to start. Let's get in Radhika Ramaswamy to really give us a lowdown of what's the latest in this case.
Neelam Shinde, who's critically injured due to an accident in California, is still in coma, but she's showing signs of improvement. This has been confirmed by family members after Neelam's father and cousin visited her in the hospital, which is UC Davis Medical Center in California. Hospital authorities have told the family that pressure on brain has reduced, and just after family reached the hospital yesterday, a surgery was also conducted after taking family's consent. Remember, she suffered fractures, multiple other injuries after the hit and run. A brain surgery was also conducted soon after the accident. Almost 2 weeks after the tragic accident, her family from Satara managed to secure a visa and visit her in the hospital. Remember, family was running from pillar to post to get a visa to be with Neelam after much appeal. And NDTV's relentless campaign, MEA and US Embassy took note and gave them an emergency visa appointment, after which they were immediately issued a visa on Friday. Neelam's father and cousin flew in to the US on Monday and have been in and out of the hospital since then. They've been briefed by hospital authorities on her condition. Their stay has been taken care of by Neelam's University, which is right next to the hospital. Good news is that she's exhibiting some signs of improvement. The hope, of course, is that she recovers soon with her family by her side.
Indeed, that's the hope for every one of us. Neelam Shinde is a case that we'll keep coming back to you and keep sharing all those details. On that note, we're taking a very short break. We come back with more news on the other side. Stay with us. All right, welcome back to India Global. Let's now turn our attention to India's growing trade diplomacy, where Foreign Minister Dr. Jaishankar has arrived in London on Tuesday to begin his 6-day visit to strengthen bilateral cooperation with the UK and Ireland. Over the next 2 days, Dr. Jaishankar will hold bilateral talks with his British counterpart, Foreign Secretary David Lammy, several other dignitaries and members of the Indian community in Britain. The focus of the closed-door discussions will be around the recently relaunched India-UK FTA talks. Remember, they were in cold storage for some time and have now been revived. Security issues amidst the UK's attempt at taking a diplomatic lead on finding a lasting peace in the Russia-Ukraine conflict is also likely to feature in these talks. The External Affairs Minister will, on Friday, return to the UK to inaugurate a new Consulate General of India in Belfast in Northern Ireland before making his way to Manchester to open another consulate in the Northern England city on Saturday. Turning attention to Pakistan, where amidst reports of deteriorating health, a team of Pakistani doctors visited the Adiala jail to conduct a medical checkup of former Prime Minister Imran Khan. Imran Khan has been incarcerated since August 2023, and his Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf party has expressed concerns about his growing health. The examination follows a spate of allegations recently levelled by the PTI, most notably its information secretary, slamming, in fact, the government that had placed Imran Khan in solitary confinement. Another PTI leader had claimed that Khan was not even being allowed to meet his sister or any other blood relatives. Khan's family physician was also not being allowed to visit him, is what is being alleged. This has further fueled concerns about the health of the former Prime Minister. story now that impacts every one of us viewers. 60% of all adults and a third of all children in the world will be overweight or obese by 2050. That's the word coming in from a medical study. This if governments around the world don't take action. There's a large new study that has revealed that. The research that has been published in Lancet Medical Journal used data from 204 countries to paint a very grim picture of what it would look like in the next couple of decades, probably one of the biggest health challenges for the entire world in the next century. Without a serious change, researchers estimate that 3.8 billion adults will be overweight or obese in 15 years, or around 60% of the global adult population by 2050. The world's health systems will come under crippling pressure, the researchers warned, with around a quarter of the world's obese expected to be aged over 65 by that time. They also predicted that the 121% increase in obesity among children and adolescents around the world. The United Nations World Food Programme is closing its Southern Africa office in the wake of Trump administration's aid cuts. In a statement, a spokesperson said the office in Johannesburg would close down and the program would consolidate its Southern and East Africa operations into the one regional office it has in Nairobi in Kenya. The WFP did not say how much funding it had lost from USAID, but it received $4.4 billion in assistance from the US last year, about half its total annual budget and more than 4 times the amount given by the second biggest donor, which is Germany. That tells you, viewers, it is not just about cutting costs and cutting corners, it's about impacting people's lives. All right, we now turn our attention to a very interesting conversation that we're going to have with British restaurateur Asma Khan, who had an unexpected but a very important guest walk into her Tony restaurant in London called Darjeeling Express. Let's get in Asma Khan on the broadcast. She's of Indian origin chef who recently hosted King and Queen at her restaurant. Asma, thanks so much for speaking to me. Let me start by asking you, how did you feel with the King and Queen walking into your restaurant?
While they were at the restaurant, it just felt like, they were, visitors, and it's only later on that I kind of felt completely overwhelmed that they had actually come. Until the arrival of the King and Queen, there were so many security issues, trying to make sure that everything was safe, that everything was, they came into a restaurant. This is unprecedented. Never have they come to a restaurant, and they came into a kitchen. So from 7 o'clock in the morning, we had security in our place, the dogs checking everything. So it was just too much was going on. I really felt the impact after they left. And then it was overwhelming. I just could not believe that they had come to my restaurant.
Absolutely. So any reason, Asma, why they chose your restaurant? What was the reason that they decided Darjeeling Express is where they wanted to make an unscheduled stop?
I still don't know. It's not that I approached them or that I invited them. I wouldn't even think, you go and invite the king if you've seen the king in some other restaurant. But I've never seen him or his mother and the queen in a restaurant before. So it was something very unusual. And when they told me that I could invite, some guests to that event, I decided to invite, really interesting women who are Muslim, but who are artists, rugby players, really doing exciting things, painters, someone's written, writes a crime thriller. So really kind of looking at a kind of broad range, because, we are often, when people look at Muslim women, they kind of think that this is, that we are not so creative, that we're being controlled, especially if you wear a hijab. So a lot of the women who came to that event with the king wore hijab, and one of them is a rugby player. She's got gold teeth, obviously she's broken her teeth. And the king loved talking to her about, how she felt playing, what her position was. The king was telling her which position he played rugby in. He was just so nice. He was so wonderful, so warm and so loving. Literally, I had to pull him from one to the other because he was just standing and talking to everyone for too long. I had to literally take him from one place to another because he was just excited. The queen went in to start packing the biryani. He was still talking outside. But she came out and said, "Charles, come in." He had to go back in to help with the biryani. It was just lovely.
You know, which also brings me to ask you, Asma, about the importance of Indian women in British society. Do you see that evolving and you know, they playing now a major role in British society?
Definitely, you see a lot more South Asian Indian women in positions of power. In fact, one of the women who I invited is the head of the CEO of Accenture, which is a really big company for UK and Ireland. So you find women now in positions of great power. And I think that, you know, we do need to now work together to kind of help. There is a marginalized part of our community, you know, women who have come in and are in very, you know, haven't learned the language, haven't settled in. I think we still need to help that generation of women who were left out, who came before, you know, the internet and the mobile phones. And I think that still, we need to do a lot more, but I can see Indian women, Indian culture, Indian food everywhere. And I'm so proud of that.
And Asma, what would be your next goal as a chef now?
I think I would like to make our food more accessible. I want to come up with an idea where, because you find, you know, grab and go everywhere, you know, where you can just go in and pick up something in this country, but you never find really high quality Indian food. So I think that's the next thing I want to do, is to actually have a kind of outlet, a different kind of business, but really, again, using a lot more women to produce this food. And, you know, we just, the simplest of things, chai and samosa, beats any kind of thing you can get in King's Cross Station today. And, you know, we are not there. We're not there. Indian food needs to go into spaces where we're not there. And right now, I think that on this, we need to actually kind of come up with greater ideas of actually involving more women in food, because it still is a very male-dominated business.
All right, next time we're going to continue this conversation over chai and samosas. Thanks much, Asma, for speaking to me on India Global. And on that note, it's a wrap of this edition of India Global. Thanks so much for watching.